This is a topic we talk about all the time in the lab. An ultra-processed food would be like a Coca-Cola or a bag of chips. And, those might be good for your mental health, but maybe not great for your body. However, frozen yogurt is also considered an ultra-processed food, as well as
like a Cliff Bar or even lots of products that people consider to be like healthy can be ultra-processed.
Exactly. Like even canned beans would be considered an ultra-processed food, but that's really good for your digestive health. So it totally depends on the ultra-processed food that you're consuming in excess, and specifically potato chips, and I'm one of them that you shouldn't eat too much of. But all in all, I don't think it's necessary to totally avoid all ultra-processed foods. Have it in moderation.
I don't think there's anything particular on a label that's screaming at you, but I think it's just better and in your best interest to avoid high saturated fats or anything with trans fat. It's usually a sign that it's probably not the healthiest choice.
So a lot of things on the shelves have a little label on it that says high in saturated fat or high in sugar or high in salts.
Yeah.
And it'll say on the package. So those are the ones, and usually it's processed foods.
Yeah.
But those ones are the ones that you should just eat in moderation. Just be aware of how it's affecting your everyday health.
So here in Canada, a best before date is determined by the manufacturer, and only if the food product is shelf stable only to 90 days is it absolutely necessary to include a best before date on the product. Anything that has a shelf life of longer than 90 days is considered to be shelf stable, and it's not required to include a best before date on the label. However, many manufacturers decide to include it on there anyway, but it's up to their discretion. A best before date only denotes quality, so we're talking about flavor, color, things like that. It does not denote food safety. A food product could even be unsafe prior to a best before date as well as after a best before date. A use by date is basically the same thing. Conversely, an expiration date is about food safety. So that's included on certain foods that have to guarantee their nutritional value. So that could be something like infant formula or a meal replacement. And that's because after the expiration date, the food might not have that nutritional composition anymore. So over time, like vitamin C can degrade, things like that. And so after the expiration date, those foods should not be consumed.
An easy way to do this would be to replace sugar or just reduce the amount of sugar and substitute it with more flavor-rich compounds that are already in your product. So if there's things like cinnamon or other spices that have flavor, you can increase a bit of that. Another thing that's commonly used in food practice and we use all the time in a lot of our development is artificial sweeteners. So we're looking at like stevia, you can use aspartame, could use erythritol, things like that. A lot of them don't have the same sweetness level as sugar. Some of them have more sweetness, some of them have less. For example, erythritol is 70% as sweet as normal sugar. So it's gonna take some playing with to get the sweetness level to where you want it to be, but they're really good alternatives to decrease the sugar content in your food while maintaining the flavor component that you want. Sam, all you.
That's me.
That's you.
Sam Summers.
So umami is specifically glutamate, and it's that kind of really savory taste that you get. You most normally find this in things like meat, specifically dark meat like beef and stuff, and lamb. You also get it sometimes in things like milk. And it's that really kind of richness akin to savory, but it's a different flavor that hits much more in the back of your mouth, and it's a lot stronger. So umami started popping up, I want to say, about 7 years ago, and there's kind of a new flavor that we're finding, which is kokomi. So this is that kind of like mineralistic, bony flavor. You find it a lot specifically in milk and anything cooked with the bone in. So it's just one more flavor that we found that really rounds out a lot of profiles.
Short answer, no. Our chair actually did a whole interview on MSG, but in short, no, it's not. It's just a super tasty compound that provides umami flavors that we love in our food.
Preservatives in food are specifically included to reduce the microbial load of the food. And so it ensures that yeast, mold, and certain types of bacteria, especially foodborne illnesses, are not going to be growing in your food. So it's really about a food safety standpoint. And that could be anything from your like benzoate to potassium sorbate, things like that you might be seeing commonly on labels.
Preservatives essentially act to create an unfavorable environment for microorganisms to grow. So basically they'll change multiple reactions that occur in the food itself to prevent yeast and mold and unhealthy, unsafe compounds from growing. So it's safe for us to eat. So sometimes when you see potassium sorbate or sodium benzoate on a ingredient deck, a lot of people look at that like, oh, that's unhealthy, I can't eat that. It's actually doing the opposite. It's actually making it safer for you to eat. And it's just something to consider when you see that on the ingredient deck. Not to be scared of it. It's used in such a low dose that it's usually safe to.
A lot of these compounds are also derived naturally. So potassium sorbate, for example, you can find that in different like berries. And so you might see something like rowan berry extract on the label. And that's just a natural source of sorbic acid. And so a lot of people just see the chemical compound's name and they get scared, you know? It looks scary, it's a chemical, things like that. But a lot of them are derived from natural foods. So
to test shelf life of products, we use two different methods. One is sensory, the other one is microbiological. So we prepare our samples, a number of it, then we store them at room temperature or a fridge, whatever our needs are. And then for sensory, we just taste and smell them in our group and see if the flavor or texture or even the smell changes over time. And at the same time, we also do microbiological testing where we check if there's anything throwing bacteria, yeast or mold that could be dangerous to the consumer.
Our expert on leftovers will answer this question.
So yeah, that's one that we hear a lot. So you make a soup or something and a lot of people say it tastes better the next day. And a main reason for that is from sensory fatigue. So when you're cooking the food, your house could be filled with the aroma. Maybe you're tasting throughout to make sure, you know, the salt content and whatnot is correct. And so by the time you go and eat your bowl of soup, you've been in that environment for so long that your senses are dulled. And so you're not getting like the full aroma or the full flavor anymore. Whereas the next day you're coming in with a fresh palate, a fresh nose. And so when you're eating it, you're getting that full experience. And so it might taste a lot better. Another thing is some foods can be like quite like almost overly pungent or like strong or sharp on day one, whereas day two, you might actually lose some of the flavor from the steam. So you have volatile compounds that you might be losing. And in some cases, that mellowing of the flavor could actually be a good thing. So
that's why you sometimes actually see chefs when they cook this massive meal, you know, spend so much time on it, then they just don't eat it at the end.
yeah.
And you'll ask them like, aren't you going to have a plate? And they're like, I was eating it the entire time. And they're like, I don't want, you know, I'm done. Yeah. I'm done with this. So that's a prime example of that sensory fatigue.
So in foods like mayo, there's a fat phase, or like an oil phase and a water phase, and those can separate over time because they're immiscible components. Oil and water don't mix. So emulsifiers act as a bridge between those two phases. Emulsifying components have molecules that have an end that's hydrophilic or water loving, and an end that's hydrophobic or water fearing, I guess is the direct translation of that. Each end of the molecule can work with the fat phase or the water phase and act as a bridge so you don't experience separation and then reduce sensory quality overall of your product like mayo.
I have a question for you.
Sure.
Why does salad dressing separate over time? Then why?
That's a great question. They must not have emulsifiers.
Exactly.
They must not have emulsifiers.
Those ones you have to shake.
You have to shake, and they will say, shake before use.
So I guess the emulsifier is very temporary.
And if you don't do that, it's on you. Yeah. If you don't shake it, it's on you. That's all. Yeah.
There's a lot of natural emulsifiers in foods. Mustard is one of them. Garlic also emulsifies. And that's, again, because these ingredients have those compounds with both the water-loving and water-fearing ends on it. And then, or there's also additives that food manufacturers can put in there that will help to keep your product together. It makes it a long-term emulsion, so it just holds it together. A short-term emulsion would be like a salad dressing, where you're shaking it and it looks like it's all together, but then over time, the two phases will separate.
So many. But you have to stay tuned for the next video.
Thank you for watching the video and stay tuned for our next video.
Yay, thank you.